Hello, everyone. Welcome to SCV Means Business, the podcast where we meet the leaders of great companies making a difference in their community. I'm your host, Holly Schroeder, and today I'd like to welcome Jason Altman, Vice President of Business Development and Operations for Elite Media. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
Great. All right, so I've been looking forward to this because this is a part of the industry I don't know a lot about. So Elite is a post-production company. So talk a little bit about what that means and what you guys, what you guys do.
Sure, for sure. The simple of it is that we basically do all the services needed to make a TV show or a feature film after the cameras have stopped recording. So to get a little more detail, there's a lot of process that takes place in putting a TV show together. A lot of people have heard of editing. A lot of people have heard of visual effects, but there's way more than that even goes into it, including color correction, which is probably one of the biggest parts of the process that nobody really knows. But it is a long process of basically taking the director of photography or the cinematographer's vision and creating the right mood with lightness, darkness, tones, hue, all sorts of powerful tools to shape the frame to get it to look like what the cinematographer or the director of photography intended. We edit, we create deliverables that ultimately go to whatever streaming service or broadcaster the files are going to. That could be all around the world. But there's just a lot of things that take place between the time the footage is shot to it actually being on somebody's TV screen or on the movie screen, and that's what we do here.
So we've talked with other companies about, how much data is collected now in filming, right? Multiple shots and different camera angles and everything. So what is it that happens that causes the need for the color correction or whatever other pieces that you're going into? And how do you work with, cinematographer to help create the final product that fulfills that vision that they have?
Sure. So as great of a cinematographer or director of photography as you may be, and there's some great ones out there that we work with, there are just organic elements of shooting a movie, whether it be on set or on location, even more so on location. As you guys have all seen, they might do 7 or 8 takes, 20 takes of the same shot until the director's happy, or the same scene until the director's happy. Well, the clouds might be rolling in for one of those takes and it might not be there for the other take, or, clouds are a big thing. I worked on a show for years in Hawaii where the clouds are constantly, to get straight, the show was shot in Hawaii. I didn't have the luxury of being in Hawaii for it, but all the footage was sent back to us in Hollywood at the time of the company I was working for. And you can imagine the clouds rolling in and out, the rain coming, the rain stopping. The collaboration between the cinematographer and the colorist at that point is to take all these various shots that were chosen by the director. And by the way, the director is worried more about performance of the actors than whether there's clouds overhead. So they select the best performances, and it's up to the colorist to work with the cinematographer to dial that all in to make it look like it's all existing in the same time frame, because you can't have a cut back and forth with cloudy skies and then sunny skies and have any viewer believing it's the same scene. So that's a big part of it. But a lot of it's just nuance too. You might be able to hone in on a particular character by darkening the rest of a frame and lifting their luminance values of their face. There's a lot of beauty work that goes on with a colorist, meaning they make actresses look even more beautiful than they already are with all sorts of tools they have in their tool set, and actors. So there's a lot of things that take place in the process. Some of it is because of things that happen on set that couldn't be controlled with lighting, and some of it is just because these are the nuances they want to create for their vision and their movie or their TV show.
So for my film career, you can make me look 29 again, is what you're telling me.
Absolutely. I will not name any names. I personally worked on a show years ago where this is so awful if you really think about it, but the direction we were given was to stretch the picture vertically slightly to make the actors all look thinner.
Wow.
So there's things that can take place. That doesn't happen very often, but there's a lot of tricks of the trade of things that happen in post-production besides the normal things that you would expect, and that's one of them.
So in addition to the visual, you're also doing sound work, right?
Correct.
And so
So
what causes that, and what are you guys doing on that front?
sure. So just like a colorist is to picture, a sound engineer is to audio, and so they will once the movie or TV show is basically cut, it's kind of its final edit, or at least near its final edit, they will go into a sound studio. They'll be projecting their TV show or movie up on a big screen, and then there's a sound engineer there with the clients behind them, and he's got a whole panel of controls to level out audio, to enhance audio, to shape audio, to add effects, to do all the things that actually create so much mood from watching a TV show or a movie. I mean, I don't know if you guys you probably haven't, but watching a TV show or a movie without music in the background, without sound effects, without anything, it's boring. The mood is so much created from that audio. So it's a very creative process of, again, taking the vision of the director and the producers and doing that to sound much like a colorist would to picture.
So are the sounds what you hear, are they made from what's actually being done? So if you hear a bottle break or a car crash, you're not creating a car crash. So how do you create those sounds, and how do you make that, and how do you balance that with dialogue that might be happening at the same time?
Some of the noises you hear are done by like what they call Foley artists, which are people that sit on a soundstage and they create noises. There's libraries of Foley sounds where you can actually buy or lease or rent special effects via audio. But a lot of that is created after the fact or has been already created, and you can tap into it. Obviously, dialogue is captured during the scene. Big car crash and explosions generally captured during the scene, but you'd be surprised of what might come from a library of car crashes. Footsteps is another big one. If you're hearing footsteps, it most likely was done on a Foley stage and not recorded during the actual shooting of the production. So all of that is kind of a mixed bag. Similar to what you would think of visual effects for picture, they have the same type of thing for audio, where you get these elements that you can insert into your program to kind of bring it to life.
Very cool. Very cool. All the stuff going on behind the scenes. So you mentioned sound engineers, but what type of people do you hire, and what's the work environment like? You guys moved to Santa Clarita 3 years ago or so. What's the work environment, and what type of people, what skills do people need to go into this type of work?
I mean, it's kind of an office environment in a sense. Most of the people that work here are in their own, we call them bays. It's generally a dark room with very expensive video and audio equipment where they're either sitting there manipulating and working on stuff, or doing quality control where they're watching through and finding technical and content errors that we report back to the client. As far as kind of schooling or experience, I mean, obviously when we're looking to hire somebody at a master level, we are looking for, years of experience in the industry. But I got to tell you, there are a lot of people in the industry that have nothing but a high school education. Film and TV degrees are nice. You learn a lot. I always like looking for that because, I just feel like it kind of lends more to the passion that this person has about the industry if they actually went to film or TV school. But it's not an absolute prerequisite. There's a lot of people in this business that don't have degrees that have gone on to have huge careers. And it's very much a kind of learn on the job environment. So anybody starting in the industry comes in entry level and generally knows nothing about what we do. And if they are aggressive and like to learn, there's all sorts of people and equipment here that they're able to train on the job, which is exactly how I got to where I got to. I started out knowing nothing about what post-production is. I would have asked the same question you did to me at the beginning of this. And I learned on the job, and I latched on to people that seem to be willing to teach, and you ask a lot of questions, and you put in time when you're off the clock of practicing and training on things, and you move your way up. And that's very much the post-production way in a lot of facilities.
Yeah. So how did you end up here? Was film a passion for you, and that's how you started here? Or were you looking at other parts of because this is sort of the part that doesn't get, it's not as well known. People understand, obviously, the film shoots that we see around town and location shooting and even what happens in a soundstage. People think about the actors and maybe even the cameramen and stuff. But this is sort of, at least to me, it seems a little bit, more of the behind the scenes and quieter part of the whole system.
Very much so. And that's, yeah, that describes it perfectly. So for me, a little bit different of a path. I was in another career and needed to make a career change, which I'll leave out the details of why. But and I had a cousin that was in the industry, and I started coming down and training with him. He was working at one of the biggest facilities down in Hollywood at the time, and then moved over to Santa Monica. And I ended up, after training for about 6 months on my own time, which was kind of like a crash college course on post-production, I was able to get hired there and then just kind of work my way up. I was very fortunate because I had someone that could get me in the door like that, and kind of took me under his wing and taught me. But it's not that abnormal, just in the sense that that's kind of the path, not necessarily having to get your foot in the door, but just getting hired into a facility. You generally start as like a vault clerk. Our vault is where we store all the client elements. Back in the day, it used to be a ton of film and videotapes. Now it's mostly hard drives. Mm-hmm. But you started as a clerk who's in charge of checking in and checking out elements. And then, there's 20 different avenues you could take for training within the facility, whether you have a passion to be an editor or a colorist or in visual effects or a data guy. There's a lot of different ways to go, or administrative. We have in-house project managers that are like producers that are our liaisons between the facility and the client. They take all the orders from the client. They notify the client of whatever's going on. Mm-hmm. They help with billing, the most important part of the job. And so there's a lot of different paths. And you generally most people start, even if you're out of film school, with very little knowledge of what we actually do here.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of on the job. You mentioned the vault and checking in and out the files, for lack of a better thing. But security must be a big deal, right? Because you're seeing TV shows and movies before they've been released. So, nobody's supposed to know who done it before the movie's released, right? Or before the final cliffhanger of the TV show.
Absolutely, and that is how these production companies and broadcasters and streaming services, it's how they draw you in, right? So constant security is huge. There is actually an organization that they have moved to within the last few years that is kind of the one-stop shop for all studios, meaning most of the studios used to do their own security audits of a facility. So they would literally come in, could be a 5, 6, 7 hour thing where they send their security experts in and they go through your whole facility, and you talk about physical security and content security. and internet security. It's kind of been rolled into an organization that handles it for all the studios, and all the studios basically, if you're approved by this organization, then they're good with you doing work for them. So it's made it easier on us because we only have to be audited once a year by one company. But that does take place, and they come in and they run penetration tests to make sure that they can't get through our firewall and hack us. We have to show all the protocols that we use. It's a big deal. And if you're not secure, or if you end up having something leak out of your facility, and everything can be tracked these days. So there might be multiple facilities that are working on a single TV show or a single movie, but they'll be able to figure out forensically where it came from. And it's kind of the kiss of death for a post facility.
Yeah.
Because once you get a reputation of being not being secure, it's really hard to get studios to work with you. So it is, yes, I can't emphasize enough how big of a deal that is to us and to the studios.
Yeah. So in addition to the jobs like a colorist, an editor, the sound engineer, you need IT security folks.
Absolutely.
Because of all of the piracy threats and leaks risk. Wow.
Absolutely, and we do. We have a full-time department that strictly focuses on IT and security, just like you said, and that's a big part of it. I mean, it's not a glamorous role in the facility, but it's a needed one. I shouldn't say not glamorous from a sense of what they do, but more, it's not working on a TV show. It's not, it's not anything we can bill for, but at the same time, it has to happen. It's part of the infrastructure, and it's a big job.
Yeah, it's the behind the scenes of the behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yes, very much.
So tell me what's been happening for your company and in the industry generally as we've really been watching a shift towards more and more streaming and just more content consumption, certainly during the past year and a half, more than a year and a half during the pandemic, and what's the trends and what is that meaning for you guys?
For sure. I mean, really, it started before the pandemic. A few years before the pandemic. I mean, there's just the streaming wars, as we like to call them, between all the various companies is only good for us meaning the people in production and post-production, because it is causing there to be way more content purchased, which means way more content is being created, which means there's way more content for us to work on. So it's all positive. The trend is more. And the great part about that is more, but good. There's a lot of quality content. I mean, I'm sure everybody has just really started paying more and more attention to the fact that you have these big time feature actors who, only did movies and got paid 60, 70, 80 million dollars for a movie or more. So many of them are doing TV, which to me is the big indicator that there's good content being produced, and they're not snubbing their noses at TV, which was the case, 15 years ago, but it certainly isn't anymore. So yes, and then I think the pandemic, because there were so many people locked down and even more of a demand for things to stream or watch, has just even accelerated the amount of production. Granted, a lot of production was shut down because of the pandemic, so there was the window of time there that it was a little bit of a struggle as far as new stuff being created, but seems to be very much back. And I only see, as long as these streaming services are producing the kind of content they are, it's just going to keep getting busier and busier.
One thing that happened, during that window is you talk about when there wasn't a lot of production, we had, several months of that, is people discovered old stuff. So how do you take an old, show that was filmed in the 70s and make it ready for one of these streaming services?
Yeah, and that's a big part of what our business is. And you're absolutely right. And, we call it cataloged work. And basically, these shows are originally broadcast for TV. The really old ones might require a ton of restoration work, which is another thing that we do a lot of, which means just, if it was shot on film, which the really old ones were, it could be film dirt and scratches that we're able to get rid of, clean up the audio, and then also formatting them for streaming. So these shows were all created with commercial breaks in them. So there's these slugs of black in them because that's when they would go to commercial. Streaming services don't have commercials. So every streaming service has different specs that they want their files to be, but they all need to be formatted specific for whatever streaming service they're going to, which again is a big part of our business. And the beauty of this is there's a ton of foreign markets that are looking for cataloged work. We deliver a massive amount of shows to Hulu Japan, Amazon Japan, a couple different companies in Germany. We deliver to Russia, we deliver to Britain. And these are generally, some of them are current running shows that generally like a day or two after they air here, we're delivering them to somewhere across the world for them to view there. And some of these are really old shows. The interesting thing about the really old shows landing on a streaming service is it creates interest from a generation that never even knew about those shows. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen come from this lately is reboots of old shows. They're going back into production and rebooting a show. Obviously new actors. Sometimes they bring back some of the old actors to play roles and cameos and things, but there's a bunch of shows we've worked on in the last couple of years that suddenly have reboots, and we're working on new versions of a show that maybe last aired 10 years ago, 12 years ago, which again just goes back to more and more and more content being created.
Right. And, when you're doing something for an international audience, are you subtitling? Are you dubbing? What's the current, what's preferred?
Every one of them are a little bit different, but generally speaking, like our Japanese deliveries, for instance, we deliver two versions of a show. One of them will be dubbed in Japanese. We don't actually do dubbing here, but there are localization companies that will dub the whole show in Japanese. We'll get that audio as an element, and then we conform that to the original picture. So now you have a Japanese language version. And then simultaneously with that, we will take the original English language version and put Japanese subtitles on it, and then deliver both of those. And then the viewer has the choice when they're streaming whether they want to watch a Japanese audio version or the English audio with Japanese subtitles. And
Very
that's
cool. Yeah.
Pretty general across the world. Many deliveries for various languages are that way.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys have your hands full, and we are so pleased that Elite is here in Santa Clarita. You guys moved up here, like I said, like three or 4 years ago, and have been a great company, and we love seeing expansion of the many companies involved in the film industry here. And glad you found your way to Elite as a Santa Clarita resident. Happy about that. So, Jason, I want to thank you for joining me today, and just for all the things that you do here in Santa Clarita Valley.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And so thank you, everybody, for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time on SCV Means Business.